Welcome back to 5 Minute Tones, everybody. I hope you're all doing very well. Since we're on firmware 10.02 with the Axe FX3, and since that firmware sounds so good, I want to have a look at one of my favorite amp models of all time, the USA 2C++. So I'm going to be doing all of this to start with one of my cabs. This is the LT Marv 412 Mix 10 cabinet. If you go to the Exchange website, you can download this IR. It's based on my Marshall 4x12 with vintage 30s, but we are going to have a listen to this with some other factory IR choices and some other guitars at the end. All I've done in the preamp section, as usual, is I have set the low cut to 80 and the high cut to 10K. So we can talk about the amp now. If you've seen any of my other videos with this amp or the Mark series amps in general, you know it's basically the same kind of routine. We're going to turn the bass and the middle down and the treble up because these are EQ controls that come before the gain stages. Then we're going to use the output EQ to really shape the tone. So bass, middle, and treble basically kind of shape the feel or the texture of the distortion, and then the output EQ, the 5-band there, is going to shape the tone. So this is pretty much my starting point with basically any guitar, and then I would tweak it depending on the guitar I'm using. I'm using my 2008 PRS SC245. It's got the stock pickups in it, and I would do this. I would turn the overdrive up to 10, and I would turn the input drive to 6, and I'd turn the bass down to about 1, the mids down to 2, and the treble to 7. Now we haven't touched the graphic just yet. I'm also going to bring the presence down to 1. These are just my default settings. I've done this so much with this amp that I find these just really work for me, and I like bringing the master volume down to about 3.5. So we haven't touched the graphic, and it's going to sound a little bit lame. But there's the right sort of texture happening with the distortion there. Before we go to the output EQ though, I'm going to go to the input EQ, and with these amps what I've been doing a lot recently is turning up the low cut to about 300 Hertz. I just find this really tightens it up if you want those kind of tight low-end chugs. And then the output EQ, this is where the to-taste thing really comes in, but I find you kind of have to boost 80 Hertz, and you have to pull out a bit of 240 and a bit of 750 and boost the other two sliders on there a little bit. So this is what I do. I like to go to about 6 dB on the 80 slider, and I like to pull out 240. You might like to boost 240 here. It kind of gives you this kind of woodiness about it, but I like it out, and I bring the 750 slider down quite a bit. And lately I've just been adding a little bit of 2200 and an even littler bit of 6600. Let's have a listen to this now, because this is totally my happy place when it comes to high gain sound. Totally rad, right? It has that really dry percussive thing going on, but it's got a great feel. You can dig in and you can really enjoy the texture of that distortion there. Now, there's a few extra little bits that I like to do that we can do with firmware 10.02. If you go to the dynamic section, let's set the output comp type to gain enhancer. And because I'm playing in the studio at the moment, I'm going to add a little bit of this. Maybe I'll turn it up to about 3. I found that I don't really need this live, but in the studio, it really contributes to that feel. Gorgeous. Let's go to the preamp section. The ideal section, because I find turning on the fat switch is a great way to just beef this up even more. I'll play a little bit without the fat switch and then a bit with the fat switch. That is just adding so much girth to the sound. I love that. And you could assign a control switch to this if you like, so that you turn the fat switch on when you want to play a solo, and you might want to turn it off for a really super tight rhythm guitar sound. There's one extra thing I like to chuck on top of all of this. If we go to the preamp section, we're going to turn the input boost on, and we're going to select the CC boost. And I find for lead stuff, this just totally takes it over the edge and sounds incredible. That is how I would dial in this particular amp model in Firmware 10. Bit of gain enhancer, bit of like low cut, the CC boost sounds amazing, and otherwise it's pretty much the usual Mark series tips. I mentioned the output EQ, you know, if you push to 40 by 3, it does sound a bit woodier. And depending on the IR, you know, John Petrucci says that on his Mark Series amps, he thinks of the 6.6K slider here as like his mastering EQ control. So if you turn that up, you're going to get a lot more brightness and shimmer. If you bring it down, it's going to smooth things out quite a bit. So what did I do there? I raised to 40. I want to bring that down. Other than that, let's just hear it with a couple of different IRs. I'm pushing the time limit, I know, as usual, but let's see. I guess the closest thing to this kind of cab I've got in channel B here. These are the York Audio Recto IRs. The 57 blended with the 121 sounds like... Great if you love the Messer thing, those sound fantastic. There's I think this is like a Mark Series thing, or maybe it's designed to match up with it, but this 4x12 Cali lead 80s mix, it's a legacy cab. It's really nice and smooth. Remember what I said about that 6600 Hertz slider being like a mastering EQ? For this IR, you want to turn this one up. And that one's great. This particular cab I find is great if you want more of that kind of like 80s Lukather thing out of the Mark II C+. I like the sort of tighter, chuggier thing, so I like some of those other IRs. Another bunch of shots in here that sound amazing are these 4x12 Brit 70s IRs. I've been using these a lot. I love the way this particular blend sounds. 57C with 121 1. Definitely check those out. Those sound amazing with the Marshalls. Let's hear this with two different guitars now. I'm going to plug my YJM Strat in, and the only thing I would do with that is I would turn the input trim up, because that's a very mellow sounding guitar. And then we will hear it with, what will we hear it with? I'm going to plug in a carbon fiber guitar, the Rubato Lassie, which sounds totally different to this one. And all I would do there is basically probably just bump up the mid-range control and pull a little bit of treble out in the preamp section. So thanks for watching. You're going to hear those two guitars, and this was... This wasn't 5 minutes, was it? This was way longer than 5 minutes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Enjoy the tone with these next two guitars. Thank you.